So next topic that we will study is cardiac cycle. So let's begin with cardiac cycle. Children, it is the cyclic contraction and relaxation of heart for pumping of blood. So it's a cyclic, cycle, which is in which the contraction and relaxation are followed, and heart beats continuously from the stage from the stage of fetus till the person dies. So this is called cardiac cycle. Now, phases of cardiac cycle, there are three phases. First is joint diastole, then arterial systole, and then ventricular systole. So we will see all these phases in detail. The first one is joint diastole. As you see, it is the relaxed state of all the heart chambers. So joint means both auricles and ventricles are at relaxed state. None of the chamber is in contraction. All the four chambers are relaxed. So this is called joint diastole. When the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open, blood from pulmonary vein and vena cava flows into the left and right ventricles respectively through left and right arteria. So children, to explain this point, second point, you have to pay attention here. Let me tell you, to make it quite easy for you, that the right portion of the heart always carries deoxygenated blood, and the left portion of the heart always carries oxygenated blood. You can see this has been shown in the diagram by differing the colors. Right side is blue in color because it carries deoxygenated blood, and left side is reddish orangish because it carries oxygenated blood. Now we all know there are four chambers. This is right auricle or atrium. This is right ventricle. This is left auricle, and this is left ventricle. Now the point number 2 says when the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open. Now the valves, you see the passage is open. You can see the arrow from both the sides. This is bicuspid valve, this is tricuspid valve, and they are open at this stage, and the chambers are all relaxed. None of the chamber is in contraction. So in this situation, when the heart is relaxed and the valves are open, the deoxygenated blood from vena cava, you see this is vena cava, this is superior vena cava, and this is inferior vena cava. So the deoxygenated blood from the vena cavas, okay, is poured into, you see, is poured into right auricle. And at the same time, the blood from pulmonary vein, you see, this is pulmonary vein, which is being brought by or from the lungs after oxygenation. At the same time, pulmonary vein also gives in the blood to left auricle. So both the auricles are filled simultaneously, right? Right auricle is filled by the vena cavas, the superior and the inferior, and both the vena cavas are bringing deoxygenated blood. And at the same time, left auricle is filled by the pulmonary vein, which is carrying oxygenated blood. So at the same time, both the auricles are filled up with blood. And at this stage, the semilunar valves are closed. Now, where are these valves present? The semilunar valves are present in between ventricle and pulmonary artery, or ventricle, left ventricle and aorta. So these valves are closed. Only tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open. So this is a situation of joint diastole. After this, the second stage comes as arterial systole. Now, arterial systole means you must have understood that the arteria or auricles are contracting. So, who will give them the message or the instruction to contract? Of course, the SAN. So, SAN will generate an action potential. As a result, both the auricles or arteria will contract together, and it is called arterial systole. Now, because only arterias are contracting, so we are calling it as arterial systole, but both the arteria will contract all together. Now, what happens when auricles or arterias are contracting, and we also know that the valves are open? What will happen? The blood which was filled in the auricles will rush into the ventricle, because that is the only way they are getting. No other passage is left for the blood to go. So, of course, the blood will move in and fill the ventricles. So when the auricles are contracting, the flow of blood will increase to about 30%. Already the blood was moving from auricles to ventricles because the passage was open. But because of the contraction, this flow has increased up to 30%. And this is called auricle or arterial systole. Next comes the ventricular systole. Now the ventricles are filled up with blood. The action potential is conducted to the ventricle side. We all know that the action which was generated, which started from SAN, this action has now been passed on to AVN, and from AVN to AV bundle, from AV bundle to both the walls of the ventricle. You see, the action potential has spread out through bundle of His, and this action potential is transmitted through the ventricular musculature, and because of this action potential, the ventricles will contract. That is, ventricular systole has occurred. Now, as the ventricles are contracting, children, during this, arteria will undergo diastole. As the ventricles are contracting, the auricles are relaxing, because now the action has potential has been moved on from the auricles to the ventricles. So at this point of time, when there is ventricular systole, the arterias are undergoing diastole. Also, ventricular systole increases the ventricular pressure, of course, because now the blood is inside the ventricles. These are the two chambers where the blood is present. And we are saying that the ventricles are also contracting. That means now, due to contraction, the space of the ventricle has reduced. Whenever we squeeze something or whenever we try to contract a thing, the volume or the space inside it will decrease, and because of that the pressure increases. One more thing, children, which is to be noted here, that when the blood has passed on from auricles to the ventricles, the flaps of both the tricuspid and bicuspid valves have spread out, and they have closed these passage. See, closure of tricuspid and bicuspid. Now, what happens is the blood which is present here, it will not move backwards because the valves are closed. But another valve is open, the valve called semilunar valves. These valves are in between right ventricle and pulmonary artery and left ventricle and aorta. So these valves are open, and hence the blood, the deoxygenated blood from right ventricle will move to the pulmonary artery, and the oxygenated blood from right ventricle will move to the aorta. Right, left ventricle will move to the aorta. Understood? So this is how the blood will flow. Next is ventricular systole. The ventricles now relax. Now because the ventricles have also been contracted, now they will be relaxed. So they are showing ventricular diastole, and the ventricle pressure has also now fallen. Now when the ventricles are relaxing and the pressure inside the ventricles have fallen, the semilunar valves will close. Of course, the reason is same, to prevent the backflow of blood into the ventricles. And the tricuspid valves will and the bicuspid valves will open. That means the one set of valve, if it closes, the other set will open. Right? So tricuspid and bicuspid valves are opened by the pressure inside the atria, because here now the pressure is decreased, but here the pressure is increased. So due to the pressure, these valves will open and the semilunar valves are closed. So children, ventricles and arteria again undergo joint diastole. Again we have reached to the same point from where we started. Now both of them are relaxing and both the valves are open. So this is how the cardiac cycle will repeat. A cardiac cycle is completed in 0.8 seconds. That means one cycle contains joint diastole, auricle systole and ventricle systole. So again when we reach joint diastole, so one cycle has completed and this takes almost 0.8 seconds. One heartbeat is equal to one cardiac cycle. So a normal heartbeat of a person should be 70 to 75 times per minute, and the average is always 72 times per minute. This is the average heartbeat of a normal and a healthy